What's up, Taiwan? I'm Tiffany Wong with news from here in Taiwan and around the world. Taipei prosecutors investigating claims of corruption have searched the home of former Taiwan People's Party head Wen-je. The search comes just hours after Ke announced he was taking a leave of absence from leading the TPP, the party he formed. Louise Watt joins us live from outside the Agency Against Corruption, where Ke is now being questioned by investigators. Louise, it looks like the pressure is really mounting on Ke.
That's right, Tiffany. How times change. In the space of a year, Ke has gone from being a presidential candidate to a suspect in a corruption investigation. He's being investigated on suspicion of profiteering. Now, this morning, prosecutors turned up at his home around 7 and they searched inside. At the same time, they also searched the party headquarters of the party he created. A few hours later, he came out of his home and this is what he said.
今天是台湾历史上第一次，主要在野党的党主席的住家、办公室，还有中央党部也都被搜索。当然，我非常坦荡，我知道我没有问题。我也希望执政当局要清楚的说明，他今天是有什么证据，要做这个动作。
He's now being interviewed here at the Agency Against Corruption. This investigation goes back to May and it involves a series of real estate deals that happened during his time as Taipei City Mayor. Now, other people have been questioned, some have been detained. At issue is, did any money go into the pockets of Taipei City officials? Now, the case that Ke is being questioned about today involves a shopping mall. Its land area ratio extended quite significantly, and the allegations are that Ke approved this to benefit the developer rather than for any public benefit. Ke is also embroiled in allegations that he misused campaign funds. Only yesterday, he said he was stepping down from head of his party, the Taiwan People's Party, for a leave of absence for 3 months. Now, the party's response, they say that they don't know the reason why Ke's home has been searched, or indeed their party headquarters, but they say the party's fully cooperating with the investigation and they fully support Ke in defending his innocence.
Thanks for that, Louise. We'll be following developments throughout the day. That was Louise Watt reporting live for us in Taipei. Taiwan's foreign minister says he's monitoring apparent deepening ties between China and the Vatican City.
我们密切关注教廷跟中国的互动不过我们也呢很密切的跟教廷合作，宗教自由还有这些人道的关怀上有非常多的交流，20-30万的一个信仰者这个也是我们推动外交最坚实的后盾。
His comments come after Beijing officially recognized the authority of a Catholic bishop in China who was previously under house arrest. The Vatican celebrated the decision, calling it the positive fruit of dialogue between the Holy See and Beijing. The move has prompted concerns that the Holy See could switch diplomatic ties from Taiwan to China. Vatican City is one of only 12 countries that maintains official diplomatic ties with Taiwan, and the only one in Europe. In Japan, millions of people are still being urged to evacuate as Typhoon Shan Xan batters the country. At least 4 people have been killed and over 90 injured, while hundreds of thousands are left without power. Joyce Zeng reports.
Enduring another night of torrential rain and wind in Japan, as one of the strongest typhoons to hit the country in decades moves slowly from southern Kyushu up towards Japan's capital, Tokyo, with a population of more than 14 million. The powerful storm has already knocked out power in over 100,000 homes and halted many transport services, leaving commuters stranded.
今の気持ちはもうとにかく焦ってます。やばいなってなって。これから何する？とりあえず上司に電話してタクシーで向かうか何かしら手段探します。
Typhoon Shan Xan made landfall in the southern island of Kyushu, packing gusts of up to 252 kilometers an hour, leaving cars flipped on the side of the road and power lines knocked over. Japan has issued its highest level alerts to more than 5 million people living in areas at risk of landslides, urging them to evacuate. For international tourists, it's a big challenge to get out, as hundreds of flights to and from southern Japan have been canceled.
If the power failures really continue to go on for the next couple of days, then we're going to be screwed and we'll be stuck here a little bit longer.
This is the second typhoon to batter Japan this month. In early August, Typhoon Ampil also led to blackouts and evacuations. The Central Weather Agency expects this latest typhoon to move across Japan over the weekend before reaching the capital Tokyo on the east coast of the main Honshu Island. Many shops in Typhoon Shan Xan's path remain closed as people take shelter, left with little choice but to wait for this storm to pass. Wufi Lee and Joyce Sun for TaiwanPlus.
South Korea's Constitutional Court has ruled that the country's climate change law fails to protect human rights. The law outlines a goal of reaching carbon neutrality by 2050 and outlines emissions targets to achieve by 2030. But the court said it lacks concrete targets for the years after that. The court said the law must be revised by early 2026. The case was brought by young Koreans who argued the government wasn't doing enough to protect them from a climate crisis.
It's a very positive ruling, and it's one of the few we have in Asia specifically that looks at this issue. Many of the cases have been decided in Europe, for example.
The U.S. says it will help escort Philippine ships carrying out resupply missions in the South China Sea. It comes as China steps up its military aggression in the contested waters as it tries to reinforce its claims to the territory. For more on this, our reporter Jaime Ocon spoke to security analyst Ray Powell from the Sea Light Initiative at Stanford University.
Ray, I want to first start off by asking you about these calls for the United States to help and escort Philippine ships going to resupply their own vessels in the South China Sea.
Well, the discussion about Escort has been going on for actually quite some time, and the United States has been open about its willingness to consider doing this, and the Philippines has actually apparently been the one balking at the idea of bringing in the United States. I think, and part of that may be simply that the Philippines doesn't necessarily want to fire that arrow from its quiver until it needs to. There have been discussions about whether bringing in the United States in that particular way somehow deprives the Philippines of its own agency. But on the other hand, why do you have a mutual defense treaty if you can't invoke it for things like this? The gray holes that China has been sort of shadowing a lot of the Philippine missions with Navy ships for a while, but they tend to stay further away on the horizon so that there's not a direct interaction between the Philippine ships, the Philippine Coast Guard ships, and the Philippine fishery ships and those gray holes.
In a previous interview that we did, you talked about the difference between white holes, which is the Coast Guard, and gray holes, which is the Navy. In this situation, when we talk about the Escort, is this going to be the U.S. Navy getting involved or the U.S. Coast Guard getting involed?
Well, if it does turn out to be Escort, that will be one of the discussions. Now having a Coast Guard escort for a U.S. Coast Guard escort for a Philippine Coast Guard mission would be obviously a new thing, and that would be a long conversation. There are a couple of limitations there. One was just sort of doctrinal and sort of what the U.S. Coast Guard is accustomed to doing. So providing escort to another Coast Guard through a hostile situation, that would be new. And there's also a resource problem, is that there's not a lot of U.S. Coast Guard ships that frequent this part of the world. Now, again, if you bring in the U.S. Navy, then the question is it the Philippine Navy that's conducting the resupply, and what is the role of the Philippine Coast Guard? So there are a lot of things to work out in that context.
That was security analyst Ray Powell from Stanford University. U.S. Vice President and Democratic Party presidential candidate Kamala Harris says she's open to appointing a Republican to her cabinet. Speaking in an interview with CNN, Harris also seemed to change her stance on fracking, a method of extracting oil from the ground, which she opposed in 2019. On foreign policy, Harris said that she is committed to getting a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas, but she also says Israel has a right to defend itself.
I say today, Israel has a right to defend itself, we would. And how it does so matters. Far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. And we have got to get a deal done.
Migrant workers spend years in Taiwan providing essential services, but they get the short end of the stick when it comes to collecting old age benefits. Now they're fighting for equal access to pensions. Domestic worker Gilda Banugan is used to taking care of others, and now she's fighting to make sure she can take care of herself. Originally from the Philippines, Banugan has been living and working in Taiwan for over a decade. At 40, she's far from retiring, but she has less than 2 years left before she has to leave the country. Under Taiwanese law, migrant workers can't stay and work here for longer than 12 years.
We work so hard. We work 24/7, especially caretakers. We try our best that we really can help the family also. But after more than 10 years, decades of work, then we will go back home in the future, but there's nothing that we can have.
Banugan says she would have felt better had she qualified for the old age benefits available to migrant workers, payments that those insured in Taiwan can receive once they hit 60. Under the Labor Insurance Act, people employed in Taiwan for 15 years are eligible for old age pensions. Those who work less than 15 years, which is most migrant workers, qualify for a one-time lump sum benefit. But another law, called the Employment Services Act, limits blue-collar migrant workers in the country from being employed over 12 years. And ultimately, this all depends on whether their employer enrolls them in labor insurance in the first place. At this recent NGO-backed public hearing, one migrant worker broke down in tears as she described her fears of living without old age benefits.
Umalis ako ng Pilipinas na malusog at walang anumang karamdaman. Subalit sa paglipas ng mga taon, na-diagnose ako na mayroong ovarian cancer at chronic kidney failure. Napakasakit na. Mayroon na ako karamdaman na malayo sa aking pamilya.
Representatives here from the labor ministry shared their own difficulties in getting benefits to migrant workers.
因为他们在来台湾来这边工作以后，我们主要的保费我们对象是政府单位，就是他们补助的考虑过程说为什么是要该收保费，可是当他符合劳动条件的时候，很可能他们已经或什么样的状况下，那相关的通讯资料其实比较难掌握吧。
But labor rights advocates say the labor ministry has a responsibility to take care of migrant workers and close these loopholes.
更何况台湾雇主对于台湾的劳工都有这样的负担，都要负这样的责任。那为什么变成一个外国劳工或者是菲律宾劳工、印尼劳工雇主就不用负担这块责任呢？我觉得这是很明显一个政策上的歧视跟不公平。
Labor insurance representatives said changing the policy will take time, but migrant workers won't just be waiting around. They intend to continue to speak out and call for change, taking care of themselves and each other if no one else will. Chris Ma, Gino Lopez, and Tiffany Wong in Taipei for TaiwanPlus. Taekwondo athlete Shanshan Xan has bagged Taiwan's first medal at the Paralympics in Paris. 25-year-old Xiao was defeated by his Israeli opponent Asaf Yasser 6-16 in the men's 57-kilogram K44 category, earning him a bronze medal. It was Xiao's first Paralympics, but he had competed in the 2022 Asian Para Games in Hangzhou, China, where he claimed Taiwan's first gold medal. Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website or follow our social media for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally today, check out this cloud river descending into a valley in the Swiss Alps. I'm Tiffany Wong. Take care and see you next time.